Well, I actually started in television in the heyday of, when television was a place where you went to learn to make films. I started at Granada, which was a fantastic kind of forcing ground for directing talent at that time, and I came through World in Action, which was a strange eclectic mix. It was kind of part news, part reportage, part filmmaking. It was this sort of riotous mix, but it was shot on film, and it prized filmmaking as a culture. And it, the title, of course, World in Action, Granada bought from John Grierson. So its roots were right back at the birth of British filmmaking, the social realist tradition. So I grew up in that culture. It was also a culture where you were taught that filmmaking is a collective activity. It's a team activity. It's not a place for auteurs, but you were expected to have a singular point of view, paradoxically. And I think that's terribly important. Films, I've always believed, get made by the joining of an argument, a joining of a creative argument during their making. And that argument, that struggle, that fight, if you like, is what makes the film exist. I think a lot of that's kind of gone now, to be replaced by other good things in television. It's a much more open industry. It's easier for people to start to make films than it was in the past. But that sense of a filmmaking tradition handed on from older people to younger people has declined, and I was lucky enough to be one of its beneficiaries. Well, probably the film that's most influenced me was Battle of Algiers. I can still absolutely remember where I was. It was a school film club. When I first watched it, I'd have been about 17. I must have watched it 20 times since, I should think. But it never loses its power, and it's something to do with the world rendered in action. That's what the genius of that film was. It was a simple graphic story. Today you'd say it's the hunt for a terrorist cell. That's actually what the story is. It was a simple graphic, almost tabloid proposition behind the film, but rendered in action all the way. Very little dialogue, very few scenes played in a conventional sense, but this unfolding physicality that drives you propulsively through the film, allied to, a supreme observational eye. This famous scene where the bombs are carried to the cafes is just a masterclass in all the elements that you need in a film, whether it's story, action, editing, and music. But music that utilizes a whole soundscape. It's not a lush score, but it's a fantastic score. And then the courage to sit back and just observe it at literally the point of death when the bombs go off is shocking because it's graphic and real. And somewhere that fault line between fact and fiction, between something real and something rendered on film that's artifice, that barrier is rendered, it's ripped apart, and you see the truth right there of violence, struggle, will, outcome, all causality, all the things that drive our world are there in that film. And whatever you think of the underlying politics of the film, as an insight into how to make films that are about what's happening in the world today, bearing witness, if you like. It's unsurpassable in my view. Make films. That sounds easy. And I don't mean to be trite about it. I think the great benefit that we have today is that technology has put filmmaking in everyone's hands. You can make films on your mobile phone, you can make them on your laptop, DV cameras are highly accessible. In a sense, it's never been easier to make films. And I think that's got to be the guide. I think the other thing is, when you make a film, in a sense, you're forced to confront one of the fundamental truths of filmmaking, that filmmaking is not about the film that you would make in the abstract. It's about the film that you can make in practice. Filmmaking is an activity defined by the creative mission blended with what's possible, So you might want to do film X, but you might only have money Y and time Z, if that makes sense. And somehow, out of that matrix of conflicting factors, what it is you want to do versus the resources that you've got versus the time available, it's in the interplay and the conflict between those three factors that the actual film is made. And so the more that you can expose yourself to that process, the more you'll develop the creative muscles that you need to pursue a career as a filmmaker, because it is a contact sport. It is. It's in a sense, it's about your will to make those factors align in a way that develops, that delivers the film that you then recognize as the film that you wanted to make. But there isn't a filmmaking process that exists out there that's the same as the conditions that pertain to the novelist in a garret. You have to get out into the world and persuade people to give you resources, actors to be in it, people to write it, people to shoot it, people to do the post-production. And somewhere, that's the director's job, to inspire everyone with a common vision, roll with the punches, and find the creative solutions and arrive safely on shore. That's the job. So you have to get out there and learn how to do that. And although in many ways the opportunities in sort of broadcast television are less for filmmakers in some senses, I think that's dwarfed by the possibilities that technology give young filmmakers today, which are enormous and wide-ranging. So I'm hugely optimistic.